Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really practical area of information security.
Yeah, getting into the real nuts and bolts.
Exactly. We're going to unpack Clause 8 of the ISO/IEC 27002.2022 standard.
Right.
Think of this as your guided tour to the technical side of keeping information safe. So while the standard covers a lot, Clause 8 is really where you see those high-level ideas turn into actual hands-on security measures.
Yeah.
Within an organization's IT system.
Precisely. The earlier parts of the standard, they kind of set the stage talking about policies, roles, all that foundational stuff. Clause 8 then takes those concepts and gives you the how-to, the specific technical controls you need to think about implementing. It's like moving from the blueprints of a building to the actual construction phase.
Right. And the way Clause 8 is organized is pretty logical, I think.
It flows well.
Yeah, it walks you through key areas like securing the devices we use every day, controlling who gets access to what, fending off digital threats, and building security into the software we create.
It really covers the key technical bases.
So our mission here is to go through each of these controls step by step, almost like we're instructors, explaining what it is, why it matters, and some of the, key things to keep in mind.
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's get started. First up in Clause 8 is Section 8.1, which focuses on user endpoint devices. Now, these are our laptops, desktops, smartphones, the things we actually interact with. Why is securing these so fundamental?
Well, it's pretty straightforward, really. These devices are the primary way users connect with an organization's information and systems.
The main gateway in, basically.
Exactly. If these endpoints are vulnerable, they can become like super easy entry points for attackers to steal data, disrupt operations, maybe introduce malware. They're essentially the front line in your digital defenses.
That makes perfect sense. So what kind of advice does ISO 27002 offer for protecting these frontline devices?
It emphasizes several critical areas. First, having clear security policies. Spelling out acceptable use and security responsibilities for these devices. That's key.
Right. Setting expectations.
Then there's the physical aspect.
Yeah.
Simple things like locking laptops when you step away. It can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Logically, we're talking about strong passwords, screen locks that kick in automatically after inactivity, and making sure all software is up to date with the latest security patches. That's crucial.
And malware protection, obviously.
Oh, definitely. Robust malware protection is essential. But it's more than just installing antivirus, isn't it?
Yeah, I was thinking that. It feels like there's more depth.
There is. The standard also addresses the complexities of personal devices used for work. Bring your own device, or BYOD.
Yes, BYOD, always a tricky one.
For those who might not be familiar, BYOD is when employees use their own personal phones or laptops for work purposes. And the real challenge here isn't just technical separation.
No, it's the human element, too.
Right, user behavior and the blurred lines between personal and professional use. Think about the data loss risks if a personal cloud account syncs work data accidentally.
Oh, yeah, that happens.
So in a BYOD scenario, you need to think about how to keep business data separate from personal data on the device. Remote wiping capabilities are often a must if a device is lost or stolen.
Makes sense. You need that kill switch.
And it even touches on securing wireless connections and making sure there's enough bandwidth for things like backups from these devices. Little details, but important.
It's interesting how many angles there are to something as common as a work laptop. Okay, let's move on to 8.2, privileged access rights. This sounds like it's about controlling who has the really powerful abilities within our systems.
The keys to the kingdom, as they say.
Exactly.
Precisely. Privileged access refers to accounts and permissions that allow users to make significant changes to systems, install software, access sensitive data, that kind of thing.
So admin rights, basically.
Admin rights, service accounts, things like that. Because these rights carry such a high-level potential impact on security and stability, they need to be managed with extreme care.
So what are some of the key controls organizations should put in place around this kind of access?
The standard highlights several important measures. First, there should be a formal process for authorizing the granting of these rights, and they shouldn't be granted indefinitely.
Right, not forever.
Think of them as needing regular renewal, maybe. Regular reviews should be conducted to ensure these privileges are still actually necessary.
Use it or lose it, sort of.
Kind of. And dedicated accounts for privileged tasks are crucial. You don't want someone using their regular, maybe less protected everyday account for administrative duties.
Yeah, keep them separate.
Strong authentication, often going beyond just a username and password, like MFA, is a must.
Multi-factor authentication, good point.
And importantly, Temporary privileged access should be granted only when it's needed for a specific task and for a limited duration, like just-in-time access.
Not just leaving it open.
Exactly. Finally, all use of privileged access should be meticulously logged for auditing purposes. You need that trail.
It sounds like the core idea is minimum necessary access, keep a close eye on it, and log everything.
That's the heart of it. Least privilege and accountability.
Makes total sense. Let's move to 8.3, information access restriction. This feels like it broadens the scope beyond just those top-level administrative rights we were just talking about.
It does. This control is about applying the fundamental principles of restricting access to information based on a demonstrable business need. It's the practical application of need to know.
And least privilege again.
And the principle of least privilege, exactly. But apply it across the board to all information, not just system administration.
Okay, so how does an organization actually put this into practice? What does that look like?
Well, it's a combination of technical and administrative measures. Strong authentication verifies the user's identity first.
Step 1.
Then, configuration mechanisms within systems, applications, and services control what they are permitted to do once authenticated. This involves setting very specific access rights, for example. Can a user read, write, delete, or execute certain types of data?
Fine-grained control.
Very fine-grained. For particularly sensitive information, you might even need physical or logical isolation. The standard specifically calls out the importance of controlling access to source code and development tools.
Which we'll get to more in a sec, I think.
Yeah, it gets its own section later, but it's mentioned here too. Emphasizing managed access and formal change control procedures. Secure session management is also a key aspect here.
Session management, like timeouts.
Exactly. Things like automatically terminating inactive sessions after a certain period and restricting the maximum duration of a connection. That last point about session duration, you don't always think about it, but it can be a real vulnerability if not addressed, like leaving a door unlocked.
Right, an open session is an opportunity for someone else. Okay, now 8.4 homes in on one very specific type of information. Access to source code. Why does this get its own dedicated section? It was just mentioned.
Good question. It's because source code is often considered the crown jewels. It's the intellectual property and the very foundation of a software-driven organization.
The secret sauce.
Pretty much. Unauthorized access or modifications can introduce critical security flaws, lead to the theft of proprietary information, or allow attackers to inject malicious backdoors into the software. It's an extremely sensitive asset.
Okay, got it. So what specific measures are recommended to protect source code then?
It reinforces the need for strict management of access, ideally through dedicated source code management systems. Think Git, SVN, but properly secured.
Right, tools designed for it.
Access should be granted based strictly on an individual's role and responsibilities within a project. Need to know again? And all changes to the code must go through formal change control procedures, including authorization and review. A crucial point is to avoid giving developers direct, unrestricted access to the main code repository.
Really? How does that work?
Well, instead, they should typically work through developer tools or processes that enforce access controls and require explicit authorization for modifications, like pull requests that need approval. It's all about creating layers of control and preventing any single individual from having unchecked power over the codebase.
Makes sense. Layers and checks. Okay, let's shift to something absolutely foundational. 8.5, secure authentication. This is how we verify that someone trying to access our systems is truly who they claim to be.
Exactly. Robust authentication is your first and arguably most critical line of defense against unauthorized access. The standard provides quite detailed guidance in several areas here.
Okay, like what?
First, it covers the allocation of initial authentication information, like temporary passwords for new users.
Right, the first password you get.
These should be non-guessable, unique to each user, transmitted securely, definitely not in plain text email, and users should be required to change them immediately upon first use. Force that first change.
Good practice.
And there should also be a well-defined process to rigorously verify a user's identity before any initial credentials are provided to them. You need to be sure who you're giving the keys to.
That makes sense. You don't want to just hand out passwords to anyone who asks online or on the phone. What about the responsibilities of the users themselves when it comes to authentication?
User awareness and responsibility are paramount here. Users need to be thoroughly educated on the importance of keeping their authentication information, passwords, tokens, whatever, absolutely confidential.
Don't write it on a sticky note.
Please don't. And changing any compromised credentials immediately if they even suspect a breach. and strictly avoiding the reuse of passwords across different systems. That's a huge one.
Password reuse is so dangerous.
It really is. Then the standard delves into the technical requirements for the password management systems themselves, the software that handles password creation, storage, and verification.
Oh, okay. Like what makes a good password management system according to the standard? What should it do?
Things like allowing users to choose and change their own passwords, ideally with a confirmation step to prevent typos.
We've all mistyped a new password.
Haven't we just? And enforcing strong password policies. That means setting minimum requirements for complexity, like using a mix of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, and length. Length is key.
Right, complexity and length.
The system should also force password changes on the first login and periodically thereafter prevent the reuse of old passwords, remember previous ones.
Don't let people cycle through the same three.
Exactly. Actively block the use of commonly known and compromised passwords. Check against breach lists. Avoid displaying passwords in plain text when they are entered.
Use the dots or asterisks.
Right, and store them securely using strong hashing algorithms, properly salted. Finally, it briefly mentions multi-factor authentication MFA as a vital additional layer of security, using more than one method to verify identity, like a password plus a code from a mobile app or a physical key.
Yeah, MFA is becoming pretty standard now, thankfully.
It should be.
So it's not just about having a password, it's about the entire life cycle, how those credentials are created, managed, stored, and ultimately used. Okay, next up is 8.6, capacity management. This might seem a bit less directly related to security on the surface, but I have a feeling there are underlying implications.
You're absolutely right. While it might not look like a traditional security control, inadequate IT capacity can definitely lead to availability issues and service disruptions.
Which are security issues in themselves.
Exactly. They have significant security consequences. Think about critical systems becoming unresponsive during peak load that can severely impact business operations.
Or make people take shortcuts.
Precisely. It can even expose vulnerabilities if administrators have to make rush changes under pressure to get things working again.
Yeah.
The less obvious security impact is often seen during rapid scaling, too. When systems are under pressure, security protocols might get bypassed just this once for speed, creating vulnerabilities down the line.
The temporary fix that becomes permanent.
That old chestnut.
So, what does capacity management entail from a security perspective? What should companies do?
It involves thoroughly understanding and documenting your current capacity requirements, taking into account the criticality of different systems and services. You need to continuously monitor your system performance and actively tune it for optimal efficiency.
Keep an eye on the gauges.
Yeah. Conducting stress testing helps to identify potential bottlenecks and ensure your infrastructure can reliably handle anticipated peak loads. And crucially, you need to be proactively projecting future capacity needs based on business growth, new projects, evolving requirements. Don't wait until it breaks.
Plan ahead.
Regularly monitoring resource utilization, CPU, memory, network, disk I/O, is key to spotting potential capacity problems before they escalate into outages or create those security vulnerabilities we talked about.
So, it's about ensuring your infrastructure is robust enough to handle demand, prevent failures that could compromise availability, and avoiding those rush decisions that might weaken security. That makes sense.
It's proactive resilience.
Okay. Now let's get back to a more direct security focus with 8.7. Protection against malware. This feels like a never-ending battle in the digital world, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and the standard strongly emphasizes a layered approach to malware protection. Defense in depth.
Right. It's not enough to just rely on having anti-malware software installed, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You need a comprehensive set of preventive measures alongside the detection tools.
Like, what specific steps should organizations be taking on the prevention side?
Things like implementing application allow listing, which means only allowing pre-approved applications to run on your systems. It effectively blocks unauthorized software from executing.
Instead of blocking bad stuff, only allow good stuff.
That's the idea. Actively blocking access to websites known to distribute malware or engage in phishing activities is also critical. Web filtering, which we'll touch on later too. Diligently managing technical vulnerabilities by promptly patching known weaknesses prevents malware from exploiting them. That's huge.
Patch, patch, patch.
Regularly validating the integrity of your software to detect any unauthorized modifications is another important step. File integrity monitoring. And you need to exercise extreme caution when obtaining files and software from any external or untrusted sources. Be skeptical.
Okay, those are the preventative measures. Smart stuff. But what about when malware does manage to get in? What then?
Yeah, prevention isn't foolproof. That's where your malware detection and remediation software comes into play. It needs to be kept regularly updated with the latest threat signatures and heuristics,
Keep it current.
and actively used to scan all data, especially anything coming into your network, whether it's through internet traffic, email attachments, or external storage devices like USB drives. Scan at multiple points if possible.
Defense in depth again.
Exactly. The standard even highlights the need for heightened precautions during system maintenance, as this is often a time when normal security controls might be temporarily bypassed or disabled.
Vulnerable moments.
You should also have well-defined business continuity plans, specifically for responding to and recovering from malware attacks, like ransomware. How do you back up?
Have a plan before it hits.
The ability to quickly isolate high-risk environments or infected machines to prevent further spread is vital. Containment. Clearly defined roles and responsibilities for handling malware incidents, who does what, and ongoing user awareness training to help individuals recognize and avoid potential malware threats like phishing emails.
The human firewall.
It's a critical layer. Finally, staying continuously informed about the latest malware trends and attack methods from reputable security intelligence sources is absolutely crucial. You need to know what's out there.
It sounds like a really comprehensive, multi-layered strategy is essential to stay ahead, or at least keep up, with the constantly evolving malware landscape.
It has to be.
Next up, we have 8.8, Management of Technical Vulnerabilities. This definitely ties in with preventing malware, like you said, but it feels like it has a broader scope, looking at all sorts of weaknesses in our systems.
Exactly. This is an ongoing, proactive process of identifying, thoroughly evaluating, and then systematically addressing any security weaknesses, vulnerabilities that are discovered within your IT systems and applications.
And what's the first step?
A fundamental prerequisite for this is maintaining an accurate and up-to-date inventory of all your IT assets, hardware, software, OS versions, owners. You can't protect what you don't know you have.
Asset management is key. Got it. So how do organizations actually go about finding these vulnerabilities in the first place? Where do they look?
The standard recommends several key methods. Staying well-informed through security advisories and vulnerability reports from your software and hardware suppliers is essential. They often tell you about flaws.
Pay attention to vendor alerts.
Regularly using automated vulnerability scanning tools to proactively identify known weaknesses and also to verify the effectiveness of patching efforts is critical.
Scan frequently.
Automated checks. Additionally, conducting periodic penetration tests or comprehensive vulnerability assessments performed by competent security professionals, ethical hackers, can uncover more subtle or complex issues that automated tools might miss.
Get a human perspective.
It's valuable. It's also important to keep track of any third-party libraries or open-source code that your organization uses, as these can also have known vulnerabilities that you inherit. Software composition analysis.
Right, the supply chain aspect.
Exactly.
Okay, so you've found these vulnerabilities. What's the crucial next step? What do you do with that information?
You need to have well-established procedures for both detecting and receiving vulnerability reports, whether they come from internal security teams, scans, or external researchers.
Like a responsible disclosure program.
Potentially, yes. Providing a clear public point of contact can encourage responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities, maybe even a bug bounty program. Evaluating these reported vulnerabilities involves carefully analyzing the technical details, thoroughly assessing the potential risks they pose to your organization. How bad is it really? And then determining the appropriate remediation steps.
Fixing it, usually patching.
Often, yes. Applying software updates or patches. For software updates, you need a robust management process. That includes thorough testing in a non-production environment before deployment.
Test before you deploy to live systems.
Absolutely. Ensuring you're obtaining patches from legitimate and trusted sources, not some random website. Prioritizing the patching of systems deemed to be at the highest risk, critical servers first, maybe. Developing a detailed plan for remediation. Verifying the effectiveness of the applied patches, did it actually fix it? And ensuring the authenticity of the patches themselves.
Lots of steps to patching properly.
And if for some reason a critical update or patch cannot be applied immediately, maybe it breaks something else.
Sometimes happens.
Yeah. You need to consider implementing alternative compensating controls. Things like temporary workarounds, disabling the vulnerable feature if possible, adapting access control rules to limit exposure, or using virtual patching technologies like intrusion prevention systems.
So have a plan B if patching isn't immediate.
You need options.
It sounds like a continuous cycle.
Mhm.
Discovery, assessment, remediation, verification, a really critical aspect of maintaining a strong security posture.
It never stops.
Moving on to 8.9, configuration management. This sounds like it's about making sure all the components of our IT environment are set up correctly and securely from the start and stay that way.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Configuration management is the process of establishing, meticulously documenting, consistently implementing, regularly monitoring, and periodically reviewing the configurations, including all security-related settings of your hardware, software services, and networks.
So the baseline settings and tracking changes.
Exactly. The overarching goal is to ensure that everything functions correctly and with the required security hardening, and that any unauthorized or incorrect changes are prevented or at least detected quickly.
So how do you practically manage all these configurations across a potentially large IT environment? It seems complex.
It begins with defining and strictly enforcing standard, secure configuration templates for all your IT components, like a gold standard image or script.
A secure baseline.
Yes. For both when new systems are deployed and throughout their operational lifecycle. You need clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and documented procedures for managing any configuration changes. Who can change what and how.
Control the changes.
Maintaining detailed and accurate records of all configurations and any changes made, ideally within a centralized configuration management database or system, CMDB, is absolutely essential. These records should include key information like the system owner, the date of the last modification, the specific version of the configuration template being used.
Keep track of everything.
Regular monitoring, often using automated system management tools, is crucial to continuously compare the actual configurations of your systems against your defined target templates, and to promptly identify and address any deviations from the approved secure state. Configuration drift, they call it.
Ah, configuration drift. Yeah, systems tend to wander from the baseline over time if you don't watch them.
They certainly do.
It sounds like it's all about establishing that secure baseline for your IT environment and then making sure nothing deviates from that approved state without proper authorization and thorough tracking.
Precisely. It links closely with vulnerability management and hardening.
Our next control is 8.10, information deletion. This is something that's probably more important than many people realize, especially with privacy regulations.
Absolutely. Securely deleting information when it's no longer required for business, legal, or regulatory reasons is a vital control. It's for preventing unauthorized access or inadvertent disclosure of sensitive data down the road. Think old hard drives, backups.
Data sticking around forever.
You need to have a clear, topic-specific policy and well-documented procedures that outline how information should be securely deleted based on its sensitivity and the media it's stored on. Paper is different from an SSD.
Okay. What kind of methods are we talking about when it comes to secure deletion? Is hitting delete enough?
Definitely not. It really depends on the nature of the information and the type of storage media. For physical media like paper documents, it might involve physical destruction, shredding, pulping, incineration, something irreversible.
Cross-cut shredder minimum, probably.
Good point. For electronic media, standard deletion methods just remove the pointer, not the data itself. Secure deletion often involves overwriting the data multiple times with random patterns.
Wiping the drive.
Yes, software-based wiping, or in the case of magnetic media like older hard drives or tapes, degaussing, which uses a powerful magnet to destroy the data. For SSDs, it's more complex, often involving cryptographic erasure if supported.
Different tech needs different methods.
The key is to select a deletion method that renders the information completely unrecoverable using commercially available forensic techniques. You also need a process to verify that the deletion has been successful, maybe checking a sample. And to maintain records of the deletion process, especially for highly sensitive data or regulated data, proof of destruction.
Audit trails again.
Always. And the standard reminds us to consider the specific requirements for different types of storage media, both physical and electronic.
So it's definitely more involved than just hitting the delete key on your computer or dragging to the trash bin. It's a much more formal and thorough process aimed at making the data truly unrecoverable.
It has to be, especially for sensitive stuff.
Next up is 8.11, data masking. This is a technique I've heard mentioned, used a lot in testing, right? Could you explain it in a bit more detail for our listeners?
Certainly. Data masking is a set of techniques used to limit the exposure of sensitive data, including personally identifiable information, PII, by obscuring or replacing it with realistic-looking but non-sensitive or fictitious data.
So it looks real, but it isn't.
Essentially, yes. Common techniques like pseudonymization and anonymization fall under the umbrella of data masking.
Okay, could you briefly explain the difference between pseudonymization and anonymization? They sound similar?
They are related but distinct. Anonymization aims to irreversibly alter the data in such a way that the individuals to whom the data originally belonged can no longer be identified, either directly or indirectly, even with additional information. It breaks the link completely.
Truly anonymous.
That's the goal. Pseudonymization, on the other hand, involves replacing direct identifiers, like names, email addresses, with pseudonyms or aliases, like a code or token.
So you replace John Smith with user123.
Exactly. While this makes it harder to directly identify an individual from that dataset alone, it might still be possible to re-identify them if you can link that pseudonym back to the original identifier using a separate key or by combining it with other available data.
So anonymization is stronger.
Generally, yes, if done correctly. The standard emphasizes the critical need to rigorously verify the effectiveness of both pseudonymization and anonymization techniques, as there can still be risks of indirect identification through linking different data points. Re-identification is a real risk.
Okay. Where is data masking typically used?
It's frequently used in non-production environments like testing, development, and data analytics, where you need realistic-looking data structures. But the actual sensitive data isn't required for the task at hand. Protects real data while enabling work. When implementing data masking, you need to carefully consider the strength of the masking technique, who has access to the masked data versus the key to unmask it, if pseudonymized, any usage agreements that might apply, and measures to prohibit attempts to re-identify individuals from the masked data. You should also keep a record of how the data has been processed and masked.
So it's about protecting the real sensitive data while still allowing useful operations to be performed on a de-identified or masked version of it. That makes sense.
It's a valuable tool for reducing risk.
Now, let's talk about actively preventing sensitive data from leaving the organization without proper authorization with 8.1 group, data leakage prevention, DLP.
Data leakage prevention,
Yeah.
often referred to as DLP. It encompasses a set of strategies and technologies designed to detect and actively prevent the unauthorized disclosure and extraction of sensitive information from your organization's systems and networks, stopping data walking out the door.
How does an organization typically go about implementing DLP measures? Where do you start?
It starts with the crucial step of identifying and classifying all the types of information that need to be protected based on their sensitivity. What data is actually sensitive? PI, financial data, intellectual property.
Know what you need to protect.
Exactly. Once you know what you need to protect, you then need to monitor the various channels through which data leakage could potentially occur. Think email communications, file transfers to cloud storage, copying to USB drives, printing.
All the exit points.
All the ways data can leave. DLP tools play a key role here by being able to identify sensitive data patterns like credit card numbers or social security numbers at rest, where it's stored, in motion as it's being transmitted over the network, and in use as it's being accessed or copied on an endpoint.
So the tools scan for sensitive content.
Yes, these tools can detect attempts to disclose sensitive data and can even block actions that could lead to data exposure, such as blocking an email with too many credit card numbers, or preventing copying sensitive files to a USB drive, or restricting uploads to unauthorized websites.
Taking active blocking actions.
They can, depending on policy. You might also need to implement restrictions on activities like copy-pasting sensitive information between applications or taking screenshots of confidential data.
Limiting data movement.
If the export of sensitive data is absolutely necessary for legitimate business purposes, it should typically require explicit approval from the data owner or manager. And users should be held accountable for their actions involving sensitive data. Logging is important here too.
Accountability and approval.
However, the standard also includes an important caution about the potential legal and regulatory implications of extensively monitoring employee communications and online activities. Privacy concerns. So these aspects need to be carefully considered and balanced with the need for data protection. You need legal review.
Yeah, that's a tricky balance, employee privacy versus data security.
It is. Effective DLP strategies are often supported by strong access control policies. People shouldn't access sensitive data they don't need in the first place, and secure document management practices like labeling and rights management.
So DLP is part of a bigger
It
picture.
works best when integrated.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act between ensuring the protection of sensitive information and still enabling legitimate and necessary business operations. Our next control is absolutely critical for business continuity in the face of data loss. 813, information backup.
Absolutely critical, you said it. Backups are your fundamental safety net. They provide the ability to recover lost data and restore systems in the event of hardware failures, software corruption, natural disasters, ransomware attacks, pretty much anything bad.
The ultimate undo button, hopefully.
That's the idea. You need a well-defined, topic-specific backup policy that clearly outlines your data retention requirements. How long do you keep backups? And the security measures you'll take to protect your backup copies themselves. Backups can be sensitive too.
Right, they contain the same data. So what are some of the key considerations for developing a robust and effective backup strategy?
You need to maintain accurate and up-to-date records of all your backup copies, what's backed up, from where, when, where is it stored, and have thoroughly documented and crucially regularly tested procedures for restoring data and systems from those backups.
Test your restores. Can't stress that enough.
Absolutely essential. Your backup plan should be carefully aligned with your business continuity and disaster recovery requirements. This includes defining your recovery point objective, RPO, which is the maximum amount of data you can afford to lose measured in time. Like, can we lose the last hour's data or only the last 5 minutes?
Okay, RPO is data loss tolerance.
And your recovery time objective, RTO, the target time within which you need to restore services after an incident. How fast do we need to be back up? An hour, a day.
RTO is downtime tolerance.
Exactly. Backup should be stored in a secure, remote location that is geographically separated from your primary data center. The 3-2-1 rule is a good guideline. 3 copies, 2 different media, 1 offsite.
Protects against localized disasters like fire or flood.
Right. These backup storage locations need to have appropriate physical and environmental protections, just like your primary systems. Secure facilities. Regular and thorough testing of your backup and restoration procedures is absolutely essential to ensure their reliability when you actually need them in a crisis. Don't wait for a disaster to find out your backups don't work.
Test, test, test.
Encryption should be used to protect the confidentiality of your backup data, both while it's being transmitted to the backup location in transit and while it's at rest in storage. Protect that data.
Encrypt the backups. Good point.
And it's even prudent to implement mechanisms to detect inadvertent data loss or corruption in your primary systems before the backup process runs, so you're not just backing up garbage data. Integrity checks.
That point about regular testing is so crucial. A backup is completely useless if you can't reliably restore from it when disaster strikes.
Couldn't agree more. It's peace of mind you have to verify.
Okay, next up is 8.14, availability of information processing facilities. This is all about making sure our IT infrastructure stays up and running and accessible when we need it, keeping the lights on.
Exactly. And the key principle here is redundancy. Implementing redundancy means having backup systems, components, or entire facilities that can automatically take over or handle the load in case of a failure in the primary system. No single points of failure, ideally.
So having spares ready to go.
Spares, parallel systems, failover capabilities. This helps to minimize downtime and ensure continuous availability of critical services.
What are some practical examples of redundancy measures that organizations can implement?
The standard lists several common examples. Things like having multiple internet service providers, maybe diverse physical paths for the cables.
Don't rely on one ISP.
Right. Implementing redundant network infrastructure within your organization, duplicate switches, routers, links, establishing geographically separate data centers with mirrored systems for disaster recovery.
Active or active passive setups?
Using redundant power supplies and cooling systems for critical hardware within a data center, N+1 power, for instance. And deploying multiple parallel instances of software applications with automatic load balancing to handle increased demand and provide failover capabilities if one instance fails.
Spread the load, handle failures gracefully.
It's also important to note that while facility-level redundancy is crucial, it might not always address failures within a specific application itself. So application-level resilience is also important in how the software handles errors.
Need redundancy at multiple layers.
Yes. In the context of cloud computing, you often have the option of deploying your services across multiple availability zones or regions with automatic failover mechanisms built in by the provider. Leverage those capabilities.
Let the cloud provider handle some of the redundancy.
Often, yes. That's part of the benefit.
So it's about building resilience into your infrastructure at various levels to minimize the risk of single points of failure causing significant downtime.
Build for failure, expect things to break, and have a plan.
Now let's move on to 8.15, logging. This is a fundamental control for security monitoring, incident response, and even compliance. So important.
Absolutely. Logging involves the systematic recording of events that occur on your organization's systems, networks, and applications. What happened, when, where, who did it.
Creating that audit trail?
Exactly. This detailed information is absolutely crucial for a wide range of security activities. Proactively monitoring for suspicious activity, thoroughly analyzing potential security incidents, and conducting post-incident investigations to understand what happened and prevent future occurrences. Forensics relies on logs.
Can't investigate without evidence.
Precisely. You need to establish a clear, topic-specific logging policy. It should define precisely what data will be collected, the reasons for collecting it, how long it will be retained, retention policies, and the security measures that will be implemented to protect the logs themselves. Logs need protection too.
Right. Logs can contain sensitive info, and attackers might try to tamper with them.
Good point.
So what kinds of events should organizations typically be logging? What's important to capture?
The standard provides a fairly comprehensive list of events that are generally important to log. This includes both successful and failed attempts to access systems and data resources.
Failed logins are key indicators.
Very key. Any attempts to access privileged functions or elevate privileges. All configuration changes made to systems and applications. The use of utility programs, especially powerful ones. All instances of file access, particularly sensitive files creation, deletion, modification, reads.
Track data access.
Any alarms or alerts generated by security systems, firewall blocks, IDS alerts. Changes to user identities and permissions, account creation, password changes, group memberships, and even significant transactions within business applications if relevant for security or fraud detection.
That's a lot to log.
It can be. You need to balance detail with volume. And crucially, it's vital that all your systems have synchronized time sources so that you can accurately correlate events that might occur across different logs from different systems. Time synchronization is critical.
We'll get to that specifically later, right? Clock sync.
We will, but it's essential for logging.
And how do you ensure that these valuable log records themselves are protected from tampering or accidental loss?
That's critical. Logs need to be rigorously protected against unauthorized modifications and operational problems that could lead to their loss or corruption, like filling up disk space.
Right. Protect the integrity and availability of the logs.
Regular users, and especially those with privileged access, should not have the ability to easily delete or deactivate logs that might record their own activities. That defeats the purpose.
Segregation of duties for log management.
Ideally, yes. Technical measures like cryptographic hashing or digital signing of logs can help ensure integrity, creating a unique digital fingerprint so any alteration becomes immediately obvious. Using append-only file systems or shipping logs immediately to a separate, secure log management system like a SIM are also common techniques.
Send them somewhere safe quickly.
Exactly. You might also have regulatory or business requirements to archive logs for specific periods, maybe years. So secure long-term storage is needed.
Retention requirements.
If you ever need to share log data with external vendors for troubleshooting or support, it's important to de-identify the logs where possible, mask or remove sensitive personal information before sharing.
Protect privacy, even in logs.
And it's crucial to remember that logs themselves can often contain sensitive data and personally identifiable information, in PII. So they require appropriate access controls and protection measures just like any other sensitive data. Secure the logs.
So logging isn't just about passively collecting data. It's an active process that requires ensuring the accuracy, integrity, confidentiality, and availability of the log records themselves.
It's a whole life cycle management process for logs.
Our next control, 8.16, builds directly upon this. Monitoring activities. Collecting logs is one thing, looking at them is another.
That's right. Monitoring is the ongoing process of actively analyzing the data you're collecting through logging and other security tools, like IDS, firewalls, endpoint detection, to proactively detect any anomalies, suspicious patterns, or potential security incidents that might be occurring within your environment, turning data into actionable intelligence.
Finding the needle in the haystack.
Sometimes, yeah. It involves continuously comparing current system and user behavior against established baselines of what is considered normal activity for your environment, for that user, for that system. What does good look like?
Establish a baseline of normal.
Crucial step.
What are some of the key sources of information that organizations should be monitoring? Where does the input come from?
You'd typically be looking at security logs from various systems, servers, firewalls, applications, alerts generated by security devices and applications, IDSEPS, antivirus, DLP, the results of vulnerability scans, new critical vulns found, and even external threat intelligence feeds that provide information about emerging threats, indicators of compromise, IOCs, attack patterns.
Correlate internal data with external intelligence.
Yes, adds context. Specific monitoring activities might include tracking access attempts to protected resources, especially failures or unusual times locations, looking for unusual or unexpected network traffic patterns, data exfiltration, command and control communication. Monitoring for unauthorized changes to critical files and system configurations. Did someone modify a key config file?
File integrity monitoring again.
Detecting any instances where security controls have been disabled or bypassed. Why was the antivirus turned off? Analyzing web browsing activity for potentially risky behavior or access to malicious sites, using user behavior analytics, UBA, to identify deviations from normal user actions, impossible travel, unusual data access, and performing trend analysis to spot potential issues before they escalate into full-blown incidents. Are failed logins slowly increasing?
Looking for patterns and anomalies.
The ultimate goal of all this monitoring is to promptly identify any suspected or actual security incidents so they can be investigated and addressed in a timely manner. Early detection is key.
So it's about being proactive in detecting threats and suspicious behavior by continuously looking for unusual patterns and deviations from the established norms within your IT environment, using those logs effectively.
Turning data into insights and action.
Our next control, 8.17, might seem relatively straightforward, but is actually quite essential. Clock synchronization. We touched on this in the context of logging, but why does it warrant its own dedicated section? Seems simple, just set the clocks right.
It seems simple, but it's surprisingly easy to get wrong, and the impact can be significant.
Yeah.
Accurate and consistent time synchronization across all your information processing systems is absolutely fundamental for so many security-related activities.
Like what, specifically?
Well, as we said, it's what allows you to reliably correlate events that might occur on different systems at roughly the same time. If your firewall log says something happened at 10.01 and your server log says it was 10.03, how do you link them?
Makes investigation very hard.
Extremely hard. It's crucial for effectively investigating security incidents, performing in-depth log analysis across multiple sources. It's also vital for ensuring the validity and trustworthiness of digital signatures and timestamps used for non-repudiation, proving something happened at a specific time.
Legal and forensic importance, too.
Absolutely.
How do organizations typically ensure accurate clock synchronization across their infrastructure? What's the mechanism?
The standard recommends clearly documenting and implementing specific requirements for how time will be represented, for example, UTC, and the level of accuracy that's needed for your various systems. Some systems might need higher precision than others.
Define the standard.
You should establish the use of a standard authoritative time reference within your organization, ideally synchronizing with a highly accurate external time source like a national atomic clock via NTP servers or GPS time signals. Stratum levels in NTP indicate closeness to the source.
Use a reliable source like pool.ntp.org or government time servers.
Right. Protocols like Network Time Protocol, NTP, or Precision Time Protocol, PTP. PTPs for higher accuracy needs are commonly used to keep all your network systems synchronized with this central time reference, usually in a hierarchical way.
Okay, use standard protocols.
The standard also points out the potential challenges of maintaining accurate time synchronization in increasingly complex multi-cloud or hybrid IT environments. Different providers, different networks, it can get tricky.
Need to manage sync across boundaries.
And emphasizes the need to regularly monitor the synchronization status and record any significant discrepancies in time across different systems. Alert if a system's clock drifts too much.
Monitor the monitoring system almost.
In a way, yes. Finally, it's important to remember that inaccurate or inconsistent timestamps and logs can severely hinder incident investigations and even have negative implications in legal or regulatory proceedings. If you can't prove when something happened, your case weakens.
It's definitely one of those seemingly small details that can have surprisingly big consequences if not managed properly. Foundational, really.
It underpins so much else.
Next up, 8.18, use of utility programs. These are the powerful tools that can sometimes bypass our normal security controls, right? The sysadmin tools.
Exactly. Utility programs, while often absolutely necessary for essential system administration and maintenance tasks like diagnostics, patching, troubleshooting, backups, they can also be misused, either intentionally or unintentionally, to circumvent or override established security controls. They often run with high privileges.
So they need careful handling.
Very careful. Their use needs to be governed by strict policies and procedures.
What kind of specific guidelines does the standard offer for managing the use of these powerful tools?
It recommends restricting access to these programs to the absolute minimum number of trusted and properly authorized users who have a clear and justifiable need for them. Least privilege again.
Don't give everyone the admin toolkit.
Definitely not. Strong identification, authentication, and authorization procedures should be in place for their use, including ensuring each user is uniquely identified. No shared admin accounts for utilities. Specific authorization levels should be clearly defined and thoroughly documented. Who can use which tool and what can they do with it?
Granular control over utilities.
Any ad hoc or temporary use of utility programs should also require explicit authorization, maybe a ticketing system approval. You should also ensure appropriate segregation of duties. For instance, individuals who have access to sensitive business applications should perhaps not also have unrestricted access to powerful utility programs that could potentially be used to manipulate those applications or their data without oversight.
Keep developers or app owners separate from low-level system tools sometimes.
Can be a good control, depends on the context. Any unnecessary utility program should be promptly removed or disabled from production systems. If it's not needed, get rid of it. Reduce the attack surface. Ideally, utility programs should be logically segregated from regular application software, maybe installed in specific directories with tight permissions. And their network communications, if any, should be kept separate from standard application traffic if possible. Their availability should be limited to only when they are actively needed for authorized tasks, such as during a scheduled and approved change window. Don't leave them lying around accessible.
Limit the time window they can be used.
And perhaps most importantly, all use of utility programs, who use them, when, on which system, and ideally for what purpose, linked to a change ticket maybe, should be diligently logged and regularly audited. Accountability.
Log everything, especially privileged actions.
It sounds like it's all about carefully controlling the immense power that these tools provide and ensuring they're used responsibly, with appropriate oversight and full accountability. That's the goal.
Now let's talk about the process of bringing new software into our live environment with 8.19, installation of software on operational systems, putting new code or apps into production.
This control specifically focuses on the critical need to carefully manage and control the installation of any new software, whether it's a major application upgrade, a patch, or even a small script on your organization's live production systems. The goal is to maintain their security, stability, and overall integrity.
Because bad installs can cause big problems.
Huge problems. Unauthorized or poorly tested software installations can introduce vulnerabilities, cause instability, crash systems, or even disrupt critical business processes.
So what are some of the key guidelines that the standard provides in this area? How to do it safely?
Any software installation on a production system should always require formal authorization from the appropriate personnel, like the system owner and change advisory board. Documented approval.
Formal sign-off.
Ideally, only approved and thoroughly tested executable code, as opposed to raw source code or development builds, should ever be deployed to production environments. Use tested artifacts.
Deploy the final tested version.
Before any deployment, the software should undergo extensive testing in a non-production environment, like staging or QA, that closely mirrors the production setup. Test like you fly.
Test in a realistic environment.
After successful testing, the corresponding program's source code libraries should be properly updated and version controlled. Link the deployed version back to the source.
Traceability.
Utilizing a robust configuration control system, like we discussed earlier, to manage all operational software and its associated system documentation is crucial. Know what version is running where. You should also have a well-defined and tested rollback strategy in place before you install, so you can quickly revert to a known stable state if any issues arise after the new installation. Have an escape plan.
Know how to undo it if it goes wrong.
And, of course, all installations and updates to operational software should be meticulously logged for auditing purposes. What was installed, when, by whom was it successful?
Log the deployment process.
The standard also specifically highlights the inherent risks associated with externally supplied software commercial off-the-shelf, COTS, or vendor software. It emphasizes the ongoing need to monitor and control it even after installation. And also, the potential dangers of relying on software that is no longer actively supported by its vendor or the open source community. Unsupported software is risky.
Yeah, unpatched vulnerabilities.
When external suppliers are involved in the installation process, maybe installing their own software, their access to production systems should be strictly limited, supervised if possible, and their activities should be closely monitored. Least privilege for vendors, too.
Don't give suppliers free rein.
Finally, the principle of least privilege should be applied to user software installations on their own workstations, too, with clear and restrictive policies on what types of software regular users are permitted to install on their work devices. Maybe use application allow listing here, too.
Control what users can install themselves.
So it's about a very formal and controlled process for introducing any new software into the live environment, aimed at minimizing potential risks and ensuring the ongoing stability and security of critical systems. Change management for software.
Our next control shifts our focus to the vital area of network security with 8.20, network security, protecting the pipes.
This is a broad and incredibly important area, focusing on all the measures needed to secure your organization's computer networks, the infrastructure that connects everything, and protect the valuable services that are connected to them from unauthorized access, use, disclosure, disruption, or destruction. A secure network infrastructure is fundamental to overall information security. You can't secure apps on an insecure network.
Right, it's foundational. What are some of the key considerations that organizations need to address when it comes to network security?
You need to carefully consider the types and classifications of information that your network is designed to support. Are you carrying sensitive data? Public data? That affects the security needs. Clearly establish roles and responsibilities for the ongoing management and security of the network infrastructure, who manages the firewalls, who monitors traffic, and maintain comprehensive and up-to-date documentation, including detailed network diagrams and configuration files for all network devices. You need to know how it's built.
Document the network.
Specific security measures include implementing robust access control mechanisms, like Network Access Control, NAC, or firewall rules, to restrict who and what can connect to the network and access its resources. Employing network segmentation, which we'll cover next, to isolate different parts of the network based on sensitivity or function.
Divide and conquer.
Securely configuring all network devices, routers, switches, firewalls, wireless access points, according to security best practices and hardening guidelines. Change default passwords. Ensuring the security of any wireless networks used by implementing strong encryption, like WPA3, and authentication protocols like 802.1x.
Secure the Wi-Fi.
Deploying intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDPS, to identify and potentially block malicious network activity. Actively preventing unauthorized physical connections to the network, block network closets, disable unused ports. Hardening network devices by removing unnecessary services and protocols. Segregating administrative channels or networks from regular user traffic managed devices over a secure separate network if possible.
Protect the management interfaces.
Having plans in place to temporarily isolate network segments that come under attack to contain breaches. And disabling any known vulnerable network protocols like older versions of SSL/TLS or insecure file sharing protocols. The standard also specifically emphasizes the importance of applying appropriate security controls to virtualized network environments, like SDN or cloud VPCs, which have their own unique security considerations.
With securing virtual networks, too.
It sounds like a very holistic and multifaceted approach is needed to effectively protect the communication pathways within your organization's digital infrastructure. Defense in depth at the network layer.
Building on that foundation, we have 8.21, security of network services. So not just the network pipes, but what's running on the network.
Yeah, exactly. This control specifically addresses the security of the individual services that are running on your organization's networks. Things like your web servers hosting your public website or internal applications, your email servers handling electronic communications, file share servers providing access to documents and data, DNS servers, DHCP servers, all those essential services. Each of these presents its own unique set of security considerations and attack surfaces.
So hardening the actual services, what's the main focus here?
The primary focus is on carefully formulating and rigorously implementing clear rules and restrictions for how these network services can be used and accessed. It's about defining the security posture for each service.
Okay, like what kind of rules?
This includes explicitly defining which services are permitted to run on your network, shut down unnecessary services, establishing strong authentication requirements for users accessing these services who can connect, implementing robust authorization procedures to determine precisely what users are allowed to do once they've authenticated to the service, what actions can they perform, deploying appropriate technological controls like application firewalls or specific service configurations to enforce these rules, and carefully managing the methods used to access these services, such as requiring the use of virtual private networks, VPNs, or secure gateways for remote access, or mandating secure protocols like HTTPS, SFTP, SSH for all connections, including wireless.
Enforce secure protocol.
Always use encryption if possible.
It's about defining and then actively enforcing the rules of engagement for all the various services that are operating on your network infrastructure, securing the applications and protocols themselves.
Securing the endpoints of the network communication.
Next up is 8.22, segregation of networks. We mentioned this briefly under network security. Let's dive deeper.
Yes, this fundamental security principle involves logically or physically separating different parts of your organization's network infrastructure. The main goal is to significantly limit the potential impact of a security incident.
Containment, right.
Exactly. The idea is that if one segment of the network is compromised, say, a workstation gets infected with malware, the attacker's ability to move laterally from that segment to other more sensitive areas of the network, like server farms or databases, is substantially restricted by the segmentation boundaries.
Stop breaches from spreading easily.
How do organizations typically go about implementing network segregation? What does it look like?
By strategically creating isolated network segments, often called zones or VLANs, virtual local area networks, for specific purposes, departments, trust levels, or levels of data sensitivity. So group similar things together and isolate them.
Generally, yes. Think about having separate networks or zones for your core corporate systems that handle sensitive financial or customer data, a high-trust zone. A dedicated guest Wi-Fi network that provides internet access but is completely isolated from your internal resources. A demilitarized zone, DMZ, for your internet-facing servers, like web and email servers, which acts as a buffer between the untrusted public internet and your trusted internal network. Maybe separate zones for development, testing, and production servers, or zones for IoT devices.
Lots of different potential zones.
The critical aspect of network segregation is to carefully control the connectivity between these isolated network segments. You don't just create zones, you control the traffic flow between them, usually using firewalls or access control lists, ACLs, on routers or switches. Ensure that only absolutely necessary and explicitly authorized communication is permitted between zones, following the principle of least privilege for network traffic. Deny by default.
Control the gateways between zones very carefully.
Absolutely. That's where the real security benefit comes from.
It's about creating internal fire breaks within your network infrastructure to contain potential security breaches and limit their blast radius.
A very good analogy.
Now let's talk about controlling the type of web content that users within the organization can access with 8.23, web filtering. Blocking bad websites.
Web filtering, yeah. It's a widely used security technique to actively prevent users from accessing websites that are known to be malicious, are deemed inappropriate for a work environment, like gambling or adult content, or could potentially pose a security risk to the organization through malware downloads or phishing attacks.
Protecting users from the dangers of the web. What specific categories of websites should organizations typically consider restricting access to through web filtering?
The standard suggests considering the restriction of access to websites that have information upload functions, unless there's a clear and valid business justification for allowing such access. Think preventing data exfiltration to personal cloud storage or unapproved sites.
Limit uploads.
You should also definitely block access to websites that are known to host or distribute malware, known malicious sites, those involved in phishing scams. Command and control, CNC servers, used by attackers to communicate with compromised systems block the phone home. Websites hosting illegal or offensive content. And any other categories of websites that are deemed to pose an unacceptable risk to your organization's security, productivity, or reputation based on your policies.
Define categories based on risk and policy.
What are some of the underlying technical techniques that are employed in web filtering solutions? How do they work?
A variety of methods are used, often in combination within a web filtering product or service. These include using databases of known malicious website signatures or URLs, blacklists, employing heuristic analysis to identify websites exhibiting suspicious behavior even if they aren't on a known blacklist yet, maintaining category-based blacklists like social media, streaming video, etc., that organizations can choose to block based on policy. And in some more restrictive environments, using whitelists that only allow access to a pre-approved list of necessary websites, blocking everything else. Whitelisting is very restrictive but secure.
Very secure, but can impact usability if not managed carefully. Most places use a combination of blacklisting known bad sites and categorization.
So it's a proactive security measure designed to reduce the risk of web-borne threats and also potentially to enforce acceptable use policies and promote a more secure and productive online environment for users.
It's correct on all counts.
Our next control is absolutely fundamental to protecting the confidentiality and integrity of our digital assets. 8.24, use of cryptography, encryption and related tech.
Absolutely. Cryptography is an essential set of techniques, including encryption, hashing, digital signatures for protecting the confidentiality, keeping secrets secret, integrity, ensuring data hasn't been tampered with, and authenticity non-repudiation, proving who sent data and that they sent it, of your organization's valuable information. It's a cornerstone of modern security.
So it covers a lot more than just encryption.
It does. The standard strongly emphasizes the need for a clear and comprehensive topic-specific cryptography policy. This policy should guide the selection and appropriate use of cryptographic methods throughout the organization.
Have a policy for how crypto is used. What are some of the key considerations that organizations need to take into account when implementing and using cryptography?
You need to carefully define the required level of protection for different types of information based on its sensitivity and classification. Not all data needs the same strength of encryption. You also need to ensure compliance with any relevant legal, statutory, regulatory, like GDPR, HAAA, and contractual obligations related to the use of cryptography. Some industries or regions have specific requirements.
Check the rules.
This includes selecting appropriate cryptographic algorithms like AES, RSA, SHA-256, and key lengths like AEF-256, RSA-2048 or higher, that provides sufficient security for the intended lifespan of the data and against current threats. Don't use old, broken algorithms like DES or MD5.
Use strong current algorithms and keys.
A particularly critical aspect, maybe the most critical, is cryptographic key management. This encompasses all the processes related to the secure generation, distribution, storage, robust protection, reliable recovery or backup, rotation, timely destruction, and comprehensive logging of all cryptographic keys used throughout their life cycle. Managing the keys is often harder than the crypto itself.
Key management is crucial and complex.
All cryptographic keys must be rigorously protected against any unauthorized modification, loss, or unintended disclosure. Compromise the key, and the crypto is useless. For the use of public key cryptography, like for TLS, SSL, or digital signatures, you also need to consider mechanisms to ensure the authenticity of public keys, often through the implementation of a public key infrastructure, PKI, and digital certificates.
Trusting the public keys.
The standard also reminds organizations to consider the potential impact of encryption on other security controls that might rely on the ability to inspect the content of data, such as data loss prevention, DLP systems, or intrusion detection systems. Sometimes you need to decrypt traffic at the boundary to inspect it, which needs careful handling.
Encryption can sometimes hinder inspection. Need to manage that.
Cryptographic key management definitely sounds like a complex but utterly crucial area that needs careful attention. Get it wrong, and your crypto is worthless.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to how security is integrated into the very process of developing software and systems with 8.25, Secure Development Lifecycle. Building security in.
This control highlights the critical importance of building security considerations into every single stage of the software and system development lifecycle, SDLC, starting right from the initial requirements gathering and design phase, all the way through coding, testing, deployment, ongoing maintenance, and eventual retirement. Security shouldn't be an afterthought bolted on at the end.
Shift left, as they say. Put security earlier in the process.
Exactly. It's about making security an inherent part of the development process, not just a final checklist item.
What are some of the key aspects and activities involved in a secure development lifecycle?
It includes ensuring a clear separation of development, testing, and production environments, which we discussed earlier, to minimize risks. It emphasizes providing developers with comprehensive security guidance, training, and tools throughout the entire lifecycle, making security easy for developers. A crucial step is explicitly identifying and documenting security requirements early in the process, based on the specific types of data the application will process, its intended functionality, any relevant legal and privacy obligations like GDPR requirements, and the anticipated resilience needed against potential attacks. Threat modeling can help here.
Define security needs upfront.
For transactional services like e-commerce or banking apps, you need to specifically consider security aspects, like establishing appropriate trust levels between interacting parties, implementing robust data integrity mechanisms, preventing modification of transactions, enforcing strong authorization controls, who can do what, ensuring the confidentiality of sensitive data exchanged, like payment details, and providing non-repudiation where necessary, proving a transaction occurred. Secure handling of all transaction details is also a vital consideration. Protect the money path.
Special care for transactions.
So it's all about proactively baking in security from the very beginning of the development process, rather than trying to bolt it on as an afterthought just before deployment. It's more effective and usually cheaper in the long run.
Building upon this foundation is 8.26, Application Security Requirements. This seems closely related.
It is. This control delves more deeply into the specific process of defining detailed and measurable security requirements for all your organization's software applications, whether built in-house or acquired. These requirements should be derived from the broader security policies, risk assessments, and the secure development lifecycle principles we just discussed.
Getting specific about what the application needs to do securely. How do organizations typically go about identifying and documenting these application-specific security requirements?
It involves a thorough process, identifying potential threats that the application might face using techniques like threat modeling, analyzing potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited based on the application's architecture and technologies, and assessing the potential business impact if those vulnerabilities were to be successfully exploited. What's the worst that could happen?
Risk assessment for the specific app.
You need to actively incorporate secure engineering principles into the application's design from the outset. Think about things like input validation, output encoding, proper error handling, secure session management. Increasingly, organizations are also considering the adoption of zero-trust security principles when defining their application security requirements. Assume no implicit trust. Verify everything.
Assume breach. Verify explicitly.
These principles should be consistently applied to any outsourced software development activities as well. Make sure your vendors follow your requirements. And it's important to regularly review and update your application security requirements to keep pace with evolving threats, new technologies, and changing business needs. It's not a one-time task.
Keep the requirements current.
It sounds like a proactive and risk-based approach, thinking about all the potential ways an application could be vulnerable and then designing specific security measures to mitigate those risks right from the start. Define what secure means for this app.
Our next control, 8.27, focuses on security architecture principles. Looking at the bigger picture now.
Exactly. This control emphasizes the importance of establishing a well-defined and documented secure architecture for your organization's overall IT systems and infrastructure. It's about defining the fundamental security principles and patterns that will guide the design, development, and implementation of all your technology components and how they interact securely. The security blueprint for the whole environment.
The big picture security design. What kind of overarching security principles are we talking about here?
These principles should take into careful consideration your organization's specific business requirements and what does the business need to achieve securely. The findings of your comprehensive risk assessments, relevant industry security standards and best practices like NIST frameworks, CIS benchmarks, how a proposed architecture will seamlessly integrate with your existing security infrastructure and tools like SIEM, identity management. The skills and capabilities of your internal teams, can we actually implement and manage this architecture? And the overall cost effectiveness of the design.
Balance security with business needs and reality.
You also need to have a plan for addressing any security requirements that cannot be fully met by the initial architecture risk acceptance or mitigation plans. Ensure that all systems within the architecture are properly hardened according to security best practices. As with application security, the zero-trust principles we discussed earlier are also highly relevant in defining a robust security architecture for the entire enterprise.
Zero trust at the network and system level too?
And just as with application security requirements, these architectural principles should be consistently applied to any outsourced development or infrastructure efforts and should be periodically reviewed and updated as your organization's needs, technology, and the threat landscape evolve. keep the blueprint current.
So it's about having a well-thought-out and consistently applied security foundation, the architecture that underpins all of your IT systems and guides their design and implementation securely.
Provides consistency and a defensible design.
Moving on now to the actual writing of secure software code with 8.28, secure coding, down to the developer level.
Right down to the keyboard. This control focuses very specifically on the practices and guidelines that software developers should adhere to when writing code to minimize the introduction of security vulnerabilities into the software they create. Secure coding practices are a crucial element of building resilient and trustworthy applications. Prevent bugs from becoming security holes.
What are some of the key aspects of establishing and enforcing secure coding practices within an organization?
Organizations should establish clearly defined, organization-wide secure coding processes and a minimum secure baseline or standard that all developers are expected to follow, maybe language-specific guidelines.
A secure coding standard.
This baseline should also explicitly address the security considerations for any third-party libraries and open-source components that are incorporated into their code. Don't just trust external code blindly.
Secure the supply chain again.
Developers need to receive adequate training on common software vulnerabilities like the OWASP Top 10, for example, injection flaws, broken authentication, cross-site scripting XSS, and on how to effectively avoid these pitfalls in the code they write using defensive programming techniques.
Train the developers.
Regular code reviews by peers or security specialists, manual review, and the use of static application security testing, tools that analyze source code for potential flaws, and dynamic application security testing, tools that test the running application, are also important for identifying potential security weaknesses early in the development process. Find bugs before they ship.
Use tools and reviews to find flaws.
It's about educating developers, giving them the right tools and standards, and establishing processes to prevent the introduction of common and well-understood vulnerabilities during the coding phase itself. Build it securely from the start.
Next, we have 8.29, security testing and development and acceptance, finding the bugs that were missed.
Essentially, yes. This control emphasizes the critical need to rigorously test the security of applications and software code before they're deployed into the production environment, and also as part of the user acceptance testing, UAT process, verification and validation. Security testing should be an integral and ongoing part of the entire software development lifecycle, not just a final gate.
Test early, test often. What kind of security testing activities should typically be performed?
It should include comprehensive testing against all the defined security requirements, both functional, like verifying authentication and authorization mechanisms work correctly under various conditions, including negative tests, and non-functional, like assessing the application's resilience to denial of service attacks or checking the strength of encryption used.
Test if the security features actually work.
Secure coding practices and the secure configuration of the application should also be specifically tested. Do developers follow the standards? Is it configured securely? Test plans should be risk-based, meaning that systems, features, or components deemed to be higher risk, for example, handling payments, PII, should undergo more extensive and rigorous security testing. Focus effort where risk is highest.
Prioritize testing based on risk.
Various security testing methods should be employed, complementing each other, including thorough code reviews, manual or tool-assisted, automated vulnerability scanning using SAST and DAST tools, and more in-depth penetration testing conducted by security experts who simulate real-world attacks to find vulnerabilities that other methods might miss.
A mix of automated and manual testing.
For any outsourced development projects or when acquiring commercial off-the-shelf COT-type software, security requirements should be explicitly addressed in the contracts, and the products and services should be thoroughly evaluated and tested against these security criteria before final acquisition and deployment. Test what you buy too.
Don't just trust vendors, verify.
So it's about actively validating that the security measures that have been designed and implemented in the code actually function effectively in practice, and that no significant vulnerabilities remain before the application is put into live use or accepted. Find the flaws before the attackers do.
Our next control addresses a very common scenario in today's software landscape. 830 CIF, outsourced development. We've touched on this, but this focuses specifically on it.
Yes, this control specifically focuses on the additional security considerations and responsibilities that arise when an organization relies on external third-party providers or suppliers to develop software for them. Outsourcing software development introduces unique risks and challenges related to visibility and control that need to be carefully managed.
What are the key things that organizations need to keep in mind when dealing with outsourced development from a security perspective? How do you manage the risk?
It's crucial to ensure that all of your organization's security requirements, including secure coding standards, testing requirements, vulnerability management expectations, are clearly and unambiguously defined and explicitly included as part of the legal contract with the external development supplier. Get it in writing.
Put security in the contract. See Clause 5.20 referenced in the outline for supplier relationships.
Exactly, it links back to supplier management. You also need to establish mechanisms for actively monitoring the supplier's development activities throughout the project lifecycle to gain assurance that they are actually adhering to the agreed-upon security requirements and secure coding practices. This might involve requesting evidence, conducting audits, or reviewing test results. Trust, but verify.
Monitor the supplier's work.
Ultimately, your organization, the one outsourcing the work, retains the responsibility for the security of the developed software. You can outsource the work, but you can't outsource the ultimate responsibility or risk. So you need to maintain adequate oversight and control over all security-related aspects of the outsourced development process. The buck stops with you.
So you're not just handing over the development work and hoping for the best, you're actively managing the relationship and maintaining responsibility and oversight for the security of the final product.
You have to stay involved and hold the supplier accountable to the contract.
Now, let's talk about the importance of keeping different IT environments separate with 8.31, separation of development, test, and production environments. We've mentioned this multiple times. It must be important.
It is a fundamental security best practice, absolutely. Maintaining a clear and robust separation between your software development, testing, including QA, staging, UAT, and live production environments, is absolutely crucial. It protects your operational systems and sensitive production data from any instability, accidental damage, or security vulnerabilities that might exist in the less controlled, more volatile development and testing phases.
Don't let test activities break production. How do organizations typically ensure adequate separation between these different environments? What does separation mean in practice?
By implementing a clear level of logical and ideally physical separation. This often involves using distinct network domains or VLANs, separate servers or virtual machines, different cloud accounts or subscriptions, or even physically separate hardware for development, testing, and production systems. Avoid sharing infrastructure where possible.
Keep them physically or logically apart.
You need to strictly control access to each environment, ensuring that only authorized personnel have the necessary privileges for that specific environment. Developers usually don't need access to production, and operations staff might not need access to development code repositories. Least privilege applies to environments too.
Control who can access which environment.
Whenever possible, use anonymized, masked, or synthetic test data in your development and testing environments to avoid exposing real, sensitive production data. We talked about data masking earlier.
Protect production data even from test environments.
Clearly label each environment, for example, through system banners or naming conventions, to prevent any accidental deployment of code or data to the wrong place. Avoid mistakes. Avoid copying sensitive production data to development or test systems unless absolutely necessary, and if you must, ensure that equivalent stringent security controls, like access control, encryption, logging, are applied in those non-production environments.
Treat copied production data with care.
Ensure that the development and testing tools themselves, like IDEs, compilers, test frameworks, are regularly patched and updated to address any potential vulnerabilities in the tools themselves. Maintain secure configurations in all environments, not just production. Actively monitor changes being made in each environment. Implement secure monitoring of activity within all environments. And finally, it's important to perform regular backups of all environments, including dev and test, as they still represent valuable work.
Maintain security across all environments.
Crucially, there should be a clear segregation of duties to prevent a single individual from being able to make unreviewed code changes in development and deploy those same changes directly into the production environment without independent review, testing, and approval. Separate the roles of developer and deployer.
Prevent unchecked changes from dev to prod.
It's all about creating a safe buffer zone and distinct controls between the potentially less secure, more dynamic development and testing worlds and your critical, stable live production systems and data. Protect production at all costs.
Our next control is essential for managing changes to our IT infrastructure in a secure and controlled way. 8.32, change management. controlling modifications.
Formal and well-defined change management or change control procedures are absolutely vital for managing any and all changes, planned or emergency, to your organization's information processing facilities, systems, applications, and infrastructure in a way that preserves security, minimizes disruption to services, and ensures the overall stability of your IT environment. Avoid chaos.
Bringing order to changes. What are the key elements that should be included in a robust change management process?
It should follow a set of agreed-upon rules and a documented process. This typically includes thorough planning and a comprehensive assessment of the potential impact, including security impact, of the proposed change. Obtaining explicit authorization for the change from the relevant stakeholders, like the system owner, business owner, change advisory board, CAB, before any changes are implemented. Rigorous testing of the change in a non-production environment first.
Plan, assess risk, get approval, test.
The implementation of quality control measures to ensure the change is executed correctly according to the plan. And a carefully managed and coordinated implementation into the production environment, often during a scheduled maintenance window. Communication is key here. These change control procedures should be seamlessly integrated for both your underlying ICT infrastructure components, like servers, networks, and the software applications that run on them, throughout the entire system development lifecycle. It applies to everything.
Infrastructure and software changes covered.
The process should also include detailed planning for rollback or contingency measures in case the change introduces unforeseen issues. How do we back out quickly? And a post-implementation review to assess the success of the change, verify it achieved its objectives, and identify any lessons learned for future changes. Continuous improvement.
Review after the fact. Learn from it.
So it's a structured, controlled, documented, and audited way of introducing any modifications to our IT environment to minimize potential risks to security and availability and maintain stability. Avoid uncontrolled changes.
Our next control, 8.33, focuses on test information. We touched on this with data masking and environment separation.
Yes, this control specifically addresses the critical need to appropriately select, carefully protect, and effectively manage the data that is used for testing purposes during software development, system deployment, and quality assurance activities. The use of inappropriate or unprotected test data can inadvertently expose sensitive information or lead to flawed testing results.
So managing the data used for tests, what are the main considerations here?
You should always strive to use non-sensitive, synthetic, artificially generated, or properly anonymized masked test data whenever possible. Avoid using real production data if you don't absolutely need it for the test to be valid.
Use fake or masked data first.
If there is a compelling and documented business need to use actual operational production data for testing, maybe for performance testing or complex integration testing, you must ensure that the same stringent access control procedures that apply in your production environment are also applied to that data in the test environment.
Apply production controls to production data wherever it is.
You should obtain specific documented authorization for each instance of copying production data for testing purposes. Meticulously log the copying process and the subsequent use of this data in the test environment. Implement robust techniques, like masking or pseudonymization, to obscure or remove any sensitive information from the test data before it's used, if feasible. And ensure that the operational data is securely deleted from the test environment immediately after the testing activities are complete, using the secure deletion methods we discussed earlier. Don't leave production data lying around in test systems.
Clean up sensitive test data afterwards.
It's all about protecting your valuable production data, even when it's being temporarily used for essential testing activities. Minimize the risk associated with test data.
Our final control within Clause 8 is 8.34, protection of information during audit testing, ensuring audits don't break things.
Exactly. This control focuses on the need to carefully balance the legitimate requirement for internal or external auditors to conduct necessary assessments and tests of your systems to provide assurance, with the paramount need to minimize any potential negative impact of these audit activities on your live operational systems and ongoing business processes. Auditors need access, but it needs to be safe access.
A potentially delicate balance. What kind of guidelines are typically in place to achieve this?
Any audit tests or other assurance activities that involve access to operational systems should be carefully planned and explicitly agreed upon in advance between the auditors and the relevant business and IT management. No surprise, intrusive tests on production.
Plan the audit tests with management.
You should collaboratively agree on the specific access request that the auditors will need, what systems, what data, what level of privilege. Carefully control the scope of any technical audit test to only what is absolutely necessary to achieve the audit objective. And ideally, limit the auditor's access to read-only permissions wherever possible. Let them look but not touch production if feasible.
Read-only is safest.
If read-only access is not sufficient for the required testing, maybe they need to test input validation or run a specific tool, any non-read-only activities should ideally be performed by experienced system administrators under the direct supervision or on behalf of the auditors, rather than giving auditors direct write-execute access to production.
Supervise non-read-only audit actions.
The security posture of any devices, like laptops, that auditors will be using to connect to or test your systems should be verified to ensure they don't introduce any new vulnerabilities or malware. Check the auditor's machine security. If non-read-only access is granted, it should ideally be limited to isolated copies of system files or databases created specifically for the audit, which should then be securely deleted immediately after the audit testing is concluded. Test on a copy, not live data, if possible.
Use isolated copies for intrusive tests.
Any special processing required by the audit or the running of specific audit tools on live systems should be explicitly agreed upon beforehand. And any potentially impactful tests, like vulnerability scans or simulated attacks, should be scheduled to be conducted outside of normal business hours to minimize potential disruption to users and business processes.
Test during off hours if it might be disruptive.
Finally, all access granted to auditors for testing purposes, especially privileged access, should be thoroughly monitored and logged for accountability and review. Know what the auditors did.
Log audit activity, too.
So it's about finding that crucial balance, enabling auditors to perform their necessary assessments effectively, while ensuring the ongoing security, availability, and integrity of the live production environment throughout the audit process. Collaboration and careful planning are key.
Well, we have truly taken a very deep dive into every single control within Clause 8 of the ISO IEC 27002.20222 standard. That was quite a journey through the technical landscape.
Indeed, we have 34 controls in total. And as we've explored in detail, Clause 8 really does form the core technical foundation for implementing and maintaining information security within any organization adhering to this standard. It's where the theory meets practice.
Absolutely. These detailed controls provide the practical, actionable steps that organizations need to take to effectively translate the broader security principles and policies discussed elsewhere in the standard into tangible security measures within their technology environment.
A thorough understanding of Clause 8 empowers you, our listener, to gain a much clearer picture of the specific technical considerations involved in establishing and maintaining a robust information security posture within your own organization. Or perhaps when evaluating the security practices of your suppliers or partners.
It gives you the language and the framework to assess technical security. And that brings us to our final thought for today. Considering the sheer breadth and depth of technical controls we've just explored in Clause 8, from endpoint security to secure coding to network segregation to cryptography.
It covers a huge amount of ground.
Right. So what do you think represents the most significant challenge for organizations in not only implementing these controls effectively in the first place, but also in sustaining their effectiveness over the long term, especially as technology, threats, and business needs continue to evolve so rapidly?
That's a great question to ponder. Is it the complexity, the cost, keeping up with changes, the human element?
It's definitely a complex question with probably no single right answer, something well worth reflecting on and perhaps exploring further in your own research or discussions. Thanks for joining us for this in-depth exploration on the deep dive.